and I are really, glad to be here and privileged to have been asked to come and talk a little bit about what we do at TVS Design. For those of you that don't know about TVS, the firm was established by Bill Thompson, Tom Vincilette, and Ray Stanback back in 1968 in Atlanta, Georgia. And we've done a large number of the prominent buildings that are in the city of Atlanta. And as a firm, the work that the initial founders set out to do has always been an exploration of innovation and technological excellence, as well as an emphasis on delivery quality. And with that said, it's garnered us expertise in convention centers. So public assembly is one of our largest market sectors. We have 10 different studios throughout the firm. We cover pretty much everything there is to do in architecture. I won't bore you all with the different market sectors specifically, but what you'll see in the graphic here is that over the last 20 years or so, we've had either an active convention center project in construction or initial stages of design every other year. We just completed work on the Javits Center here for that renovation and addition, as well as the Las Vegas Convention Center, both of which were going on at the same time. And in parallel, you'll see that a number of the projects that are listed up there will overlap through that duration of time as well. That has allowed the two of us to actually be here because those projects have pushed the envelope of what can be done and how design tools have influenced that over time. Next one. With that said, adding more to that public assembly side between aquariums, stadiums, we've also found, and just recently in our research, that we've done a large number of performing arts centers as well, which I'm only 5 years into TVS, so I didn't realize that in parallel with convention centers, we had a large scope of work in that arena as well. So, as dynamic and I would say compelling as the project work that's been done at TVS is, we're here to talk about digital practice and design technology operations. And as I mentioned earlier, there wouldn't have been an opportunity for that without some of the projects that preceded us getting there. About 4 years ago, almost 5, the core group of the two of us right now and an extended network that we're going to talk about came to be based on digital transformation in our industry. So it was a chance for change, and it was an opportunity to come in and look at what was primarily an IT-driven design application infrastructure and change that and make it more people-centric, as well as put together a research and development component that was never there in the firm. From that, looking at the things that others at my level, principal-wise, were trying to figure out transformation as far as digital tools, processes, the engagement of clients, how we deliver, how do we need to better manage that? And a part of my discussions was that we needed less of a management structure or coordination of those tools, but something that was a framework that dealt with the people first, because if you don't have the right infrastructure for the people to grow and develop and create, it won't work. And from that, this is where we got to what are our 3 mantras under digital practice and design technology ops: people, processes, and tools. So a large amount of what was my job almost 5 years ago was to convince the firm that we needed a balancing act between what was IT and what would be this new entity that we were creating. And that was hard for them to see because, as many of you might know, if you're in AEC, that vertical structure of what was always technology and IT was always driven under one group. And you'd end up having specialists underneath that group. But my take on it and my vision was that we have architects coming into practice that are more hybrid and capable of doing more than what the traditional architect can do. So why do we need specific specialists? There's some needs and necessities for specialization. Emilio is our director of digital practice and design computation. Our design manager and director of design computation, which means that his specialty and a group that he leads underneath him is focused in that area. But that group, they're not a separate group of design computational specialists. They're just our designers and architects that are in our studios that he has some oversight and direction of based on the project types. So the idea that the entity that we created governs processes, standards, and application, had to be separate from IT, but parallel. And luckily, in tandem with an old colleague of mine from Perkins and Will, Jessica Steele Harden, we have a great balancing act happening at TVS that allows us to focus on our strategic priority of basically keeping pace with our industry leaders. And that's tough for a very small firm. I don't know if you saw on that second slide, there's only 145 of us at TVS. We have an office in LA, a small office in LA, and another office in Tampa, but the majority of that 145 is in Atlanta. So our resources are limited. So we found a way to be agile, nimble. We partner up and have a lot of relationships. Rob and Charlie are old friends, and we've done some things with Core, and we try to bring them into project processes when we can. We have to do that in order for us to compete. And a large amount of the work that I show will show that as a small firm, we do work that big firms do as well. So focusing on people, as I said, was the first take of how we wanted this to come together. And Emilio actually was at TVS prior to me for about 5 years.
That's right.
Left, found out, some of the things that were happening because he was trying to make change when he was there, realized it wasn't happening, came back in the role that he's in. So the studio in its entirety is just the two of us. However, there's 17 other individuals that are throughout the firm, spread it out as a network of collective intelligence that we both connect with. And the framework goes beyond the digital tools. So, we're going to talk a lot about what you all have seen so far as things that we apply and do, but we're also going to talk about how we're dealing with those individuals that aren't the traditional architects that, typically, as far as the profession goes, you either get put into a specialized position based on something you're really good at. And that idea of being the real generalist to do more is very difficult. So we've kind of structured a balancing act between what would be human resources as well as talent development to create growth paths so that certain areas of expertise, proclivities that you might have with different tools allow you to actually still be that generalized architect, but then focus on the things that make you want to get up and go to work every day. And for me, I believe that's a necessity to put together the right type of infrastructure for 21st century practice, especially being someone that came through a path that was a little bit winding because I was a little different than everyone else that was practicing architecture back in the early 90s. So with that said, the makeup of what we have put in place, nest at least one digital practice leader, somewhere between 2 and 3 in most studios. And as I mentioned earlier, they're not in a separate group that's digital practice. They're an extension of what we have. And some of them are just focused on BIM related, data related, and or computational or parametric focuses, but individually, they all become a certain level of coordination and or leadership within their studios. As an ecosystem, this is what it looks like for us. Basically, what I feel comes out of this is a great network of knowledge that can be shared peer-to-peer. Anytime that one of the studios needs an overlap of a certain individual or resource, it's easy to get it. And at the same time, the interconnection that kind of is created based on what Emilio and I have in place and the way that we bring that collective intelligence together just gives us a lot more strength and power. It can be challenging sometimes to pull one person from one studio to another to focus as needed, but we're still working on how that infrastructure really relates to the primary goals of keeping key knowledge and understanding growing and putting in place the right skills and an emphasis on how these teams can be successful. Because again, without the right setup for people and what I talked about earlier, this focus on growth paths, it's very difficult to get the most out of a very small organization. And what we've done is we've gone beyond just what's a start here. This is something that we'll, preview more in another event later about how this impacts our individual practice professionals. But we've got a way of tracking those that are seen as a bit different that. I know that you all probably saw that article back, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but I think it was in Arc Record or another publication about the polymap. And mainly what I see is that, what I mentioned earlier, certain practice professionals aren't going to follow that straight path that most do. And if you have the right infrastructure for those personnel that set of personnel to develop, you're going to get a better result as far as what you can and can't do. And for us, process-wise, that's highly important because, being small, the core of our teams don't have a large number of persons that can do the high-level expert work that's needed. And like everyone else, we're, in that position of model-based delivery and design processes and trying to figure out the integration of data to that. So from that standpoint, having what I would call parallel experts to the process is just going to help us as we find ways to be stronger, faster, and as needed, have that framework that brings together those capabilities. Now, I'm going to step back and I'll let Emilio talk a bit about what was there before us that predated us getting here, because that framework, is people-centric, but as far as advanced processes, TVS has been doing things for a while in that regard.
One of the benefits that we had coming in as a digital practice or evolving as grassroots is that these tools or processes weren't new to TVS. They were dated going back several years. Early 2000s, we had projects like this one, which is the Nashville Convention Center, where they're exploring different typologies and exploring type of sine waves to create their geometry. They were utilizing tools like generative components and Bentley software to generate this type of forms. And they realized that with this process is that they would also have to kind of model more to understand and rationalize everything that was occurring in this building. These typologies weren't something as clear cut as just vertical walls, but now they have to be layered systems and compositions to that.
Jump in real quick. So when I was looking to put together a team, I searched around primarily the Northeast, because at a point in time in my career, I worked up this way. And I knew a number of different people to ask around and see who was out there that could, do some of the work and have proclivities that I felt fit, someone that could direct design computation at TVS. And I heard of a person named Emilio Hernandez that worked on this project. And I was like, we got to get him back. And I had to have a talk with him, because what I understood was that he worked in parallel with HOK to develop all the scripts for the development of this project. And I think this was a changing point when you look at and talk about growth paths in the trajectory of his career.
Absolutely. I mean, this was a project that I was first doing visual scripting in 2014 for the first time as a real project. And so just dabbling, researching things. This became like the first part of the trajectory of my career, where we're trying to figure out and rationalize this design that's been kind of inherited from HOK. And being the local architect, we now have to kind of figure out and also go through a process of value engineering. As you can see, this script got a little complicated. This was originally HOK, and then this is me trying to figure everything out for the first time. So it was a learning pains, with this whole process.
So from there, we've developed a lot of different things, and Emilio is going to go through a few projects and focus on some of the work done that's specifically computationally driven. And we've looked at a couple of scenarios to implement design for manufacturing processes and workflows. And I'll let you go from there.
Yes. So a lot of our process is trying to figure out a way to participate in this kind of design fabrication process. And so one of the first projects that we had was me coming back to TVS as a computational specialist. We did a project in near LaGuardia Airport, and this is supposed to be a mixed-use tower. I think a LaGuardia Hotel and Conference Center. And this was the original design look of it, and we were trying to work in cohesion with different tools. We're trying to utilize proving ground, figure out utilizing Dynamo, just find a process that where we can take this really elegant and iconic form into a rationalized design. We were also kind of teaming up with
Gate
precast to understand what are the limitations that we're dealing with and what type of approaches can we have in prefabricating this design and putting it together so that the client can maintain the utmost quality of the design and fabrication, but as well as expedite the process of procurement and construction. That project also became the framework for how we approach this project in China, which is located in Longgang, China. And that design was something that we won through a construction company as a client. And we were trying to figure out in parallel with the designers, how can we make this form rationalized, use arcs, panelize it? How do we start to document in Revit so that we can do that handoff, which our client was a contractor. So they wanted to know as much as possible what the design qualities were. This opportunity also gave us an opportunity to kind of work in parallel with the design team, but also enhance and evolve our digital practice leaders so they can become the managers of these scripts, learn from them, but also apply them to their projects.
What I'll add is that project was probably a year and a half into some of Emilio's work. So that component logic and modular basis of the LaGuardia project that he showed, that came out of a look at an efficient way to get the model to fabrication that a couple of our market sectors could actually use and work with. We ended up finding that when it comes to people, we had 3 new resources throughout the firm that could do almost what Emilio could do within that year and a half period, just based on the way that he was working with them in parallel.
So by working in parallel with them, we were able to kind of create a roadmap, not only for them, but also to do a handoff to our clients so they can do the construction. And this roadmap allowed us to kind of also create the framework for our future designs. This process of this project has greatly evolved our DPLs in order to where they've had never opened Grasshopper before, and now they are probably intermediate experts on the firm.
The difficulty we're having with it is finding a way for this to translate to other studios and market sectors. It's easy for public assembly, our sports projects, anything that deals with some complexities of form, but the panelization and modular approach that we were looking at in LaGuardia, we're now trying to get our mixed use and our multifamily teams to basically look at that and apply some other scripts and tools that Emilio is developing. So that leads to another thing that gets to the relationship that we have with CORE. We in 2019 created a conference, which was the first of its kind in the Southeast, to focus on talks and lectures, as well as investigations of new processes and tools. So Design Next Week was a hit for a first time thing, and was supposed to come back shortly after, and we ended up having a pandemic. So what we're looking at is revising that, working with a number of you all that are in the room to bring it back to Atlanta sometime, next spring or fall. But beyond that, we have our research arm that's what we call now the Design Exploration Lab. And there are a number of tools that we've been developing. We're still working on that culture shift of utilizing design assist tools in parallel to the typical processes that everyone's used to. That's challenging because we don't have as many experts in the firm as we'd like. And then most of our design leadership still likes to work by hand and in more analog methods and methodologies. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so in parallel with working with design teams to develop this, we also supplement our time by creating these type of prototype tools as a way to continue evolving our digital evolution. And these type of tools kind of validate a lot of what we're doing design-wise by providing data to the designer and validating whether their metrics are hitting the right hitting the right numbers for their clients and also do their due diligence with that.
Now, the challenges we're facing is that you see on this board a number of tools that span the spectrum of about 4 years of development. And the top left is a tool that we call the Easy Button that actually reads every model that we have up in BIM 360. We can pull it out and in that graphic format, go through any programmatic data that is nested in that model. The key right now we're finding is that we got to kind of hold development because there are a number of other tools that are coming out that do a lot of things that we've been exploring and trying to investigate. So again, that symposium, that conference that we're putting together is to make sure that we're actually not expending resources that we don't have as a small and agile firm to develop tools that are already coming down the pike through other means. So how do we integrate it and how do we find it? And again, it's always a look at where things are going. From an evolution standpoint, we apply, an exorbitant amount of dollars to look at a tool when COVID hit. And this is our first take on an AI tool. We developed this in tandem with our other partners from Evolve Lab. And we felt that being that public assembly spaces was a large part of what it is that we do. We needed to understand when reopening came back, how could we simulate and analyze within a space, what needed to happen so that you could have COVID avoidance as needed based on guidelines. This tool was really smart, not as graphically intense as we wanted it, but we were able to apply it to a large number of different projects that were actually in process, as well as some investigative studies when it came to different market sectors. We did find that it was valuable for the public assembly sector of our markets. We had difficulty trying to get other markets to utilize it and apply it in any manner. So with that said, we're always looking ahead to what's coming next. So level 2 BIM, how AI and smart construction will impact us. That data side of things that was a part of a large amount of what we showed in that one slide. We're trying to figure out how to bring that down to a means of actually evaluating studios and looking at the progress work that the teams are doing and bring that data back to a way to find more efficiencies in process, as well as looking ahead so that we're keeping pace with how that human machine interface is going to really impact what we do. Beyond that, and this is more in Emilio's sphere of influence, these other tools that are coming out that are really going to change how we do things. I mean, I'm not going to even speculate on how any of these might impact, with the exception of Omniverse. I think that might be our first, next level research into this.
It's the only thing we can do is adopt these things as part of our arsenal of digital design tools. Just like the saying, going back as to sketching, these are just ways to create ideas and ways to explore different possibilities.
So from there, more to come on the next evolution of design next. And thank you all for being here.